We are back, and we are back with the last Draftcast of the year. A little sad, but a lot of fun ahead for the next hour. I'm excited to break it down. Spencer had some fun with everyone tonight. Sent out a tweet. He said if there were 20 retweets, he would draft with $4,000 less than David and I. And it happened. The people showed up. The retweets happened, and now Spence, you got your work cut out for you tonight. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Joel. You know, we talk about this most weeks on the show. We have the best audience in golf. It's engaging. They are sharp, and they did show up, and we very quickly hit 20 retweets on that. So I'm excited to see how this is going to turn out. This is a concept that, you know, I think we've had different iterations of this where we've all left money on the table. Nobody's ever gone this route before, but if nothing else for everybody tuning in, you're going to see different unique constructions this week based off of that. And it's also going to change the strategy to the show. Everybody's going to kind of know where I need to be. So I think based off of that, it just adds a different game theory for us to all try to encounter.
If you're looking for a strategy on low price players, you're gonna have to look Spencer's way this week because that's where he's going to be living in this draft. But of course, congratulations are in order to team audience. Great draft last week. It really was an excellent draft. Regardless of how we all did, you guys put out a great lineup last week. You really drafted some great players. So team audience on a heater, looking to repeat it. Hey, you've handicapped Spencer, so you should have a good chance to go back to back. But you'll have me and David in your way as well. David, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm, as you said, a little bittersweet hitting the end of the FedEx Cup fall. But look, I think it's been a fantastic set of events. There's been a lot of opportunities, really. We love these alternative events where you do tend to get a weaker field, but also you get a ton of opportunities as a result of that if you can really nail in on the player profile that you're looking forward to. So super excited to see how the draft goes. Super excited to see Spence justifying some absurd 6K picks that absolutely nobody wants to take. That's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, last show of last draft of the year, we'll probably do a end of year recap. We tend to do one of those in December just to kind of recap the year, best pick of the year, worst pick of the year, whose season we're looking forward to in 2025, all that kind of stuff. So that's always good fun as well. But yeah, a little sad, and you know, it's a long route if you lose this draft from now until the century when the next PGA Draft Cast is in January. So there's a lot of bragging rights on the line as well.
Well, we still have a lot of fun ahead of us tonight. But tonight we have Georgia on my mind, the RSM Classic. 2 courses to break down. Spence, you got your work cut out for you this week. What are you looking for in Georgia?
Yeah, so you have the Sea Island course. It was designed in 1928 by Harry Colt and C.H. Allison. There have been some restorations done to it, most notably by Tom Fazio in 1998. We talk about it a lot on this show. The main viewpoint of a Fazio design usually comes down to this extreme undulation throughout, but I kind of want to take everybody away from that for a second because there are a lot of different contextual standpoints here that we normally don't get from the now 79-year-old when you look at the way that he builds course. So most of the link style quirks are still there from the original layout. We see that when diving into easy to hit fairways, which are going to be a necessity to locate since the field connects on 80% of their greens and regulations when they hit their approach shots from the short grass. That's a total that's about as high as any venue that you'll see on tour. You also get a facility here talking about the ease of finding these fairways, 7.2 yards wider than your standard setup that you're going to get. So a lot of that yields this really standard expectation. You need to find a bunch of fairways, use that iron proximity, which is going to be from 100 to 175 yards this week. There's over an 8% increase in those opportunities. And then to diversify this further, at the end of the day, unfortunately, it really does come down to the ability to make putts. There are going to be over 8% more putts made from outside of 10 feet this week. So that kind of convolutes this pitch and putt narrative that you sometimes get, because even though it's important to find the short grass and then put the ball onto the green, you're still finding golfers that are going to be making putts from further distance. But I think for me here, Joel, you kind of mentioned it. There's 2 courses. It's at least something from a game theory perspective that on Thursday or Friday, golfers are going to have to rotate and play the other course. I didn't necessarily take a massive deviation inside of my sheet. In reality, they're very similar courses. One is going to be a par 72. You're going to get 4 par 5s. If you want to add ever so slightly more increase onto par 5 scoring, I think that's certainly a route you can consider. Not something that I did because you only have 2 more than you normally would, but it's kind of that 3-pronged outlook where find a fairway, capitalize as much as possible with your irons, and then be able to make putts on what is a soft Bermuda surface. But the key to that is it is a little bit speedier than expected. You normally don't see these soft Bermuda courses play quite this fast. So you put those 3 things together, I think you're looking at a pretty good opportunity to try to take down what ends up becoming the last real tournament of the season here.
Boom. There you have it. We are going to have a draft tonight. Before I break down the rules, audience, since you guys won last week, the first person to put the draft order in the chat will be the order. So go ahead, speed up, get it in the chat. The first person to drop an order is what we're going to use for tonight's draft. And while we wait for someone to do that, a quick recap of the rules. The way this works is it works like your typical snake style draft. 1 through 4, and then the 4th pick will get the first pick in the second round and go back. Kind of like fantasy football. The only caveat is you do need to stay within your DraftKings salary. So you can't just take all the best players. You need to make sure you can afford each golfer that you draft. So if you were confused before by what we were saying with Spencer leaving $4,000 on the table, what that means is everyone else, audience, David and I, can spend $50,000 total on their golfers. Spencer can spend $46,000 total. He's got to spend less just to make his lineup, which means he's going to have to target and feature some more bargain salary guys just to make his lineup work. So if you're looking for salary savers, probably want to look at Spencer's lineup this week because he'll be targeting them early and often. Zach, we appreciate you. Got the order in, and we will be going audience first, Spencer second, Dave third. I will be drafting last on the snake, exactly where I want to be. Zach, I appreciate it. I know you like me a lot, and you wanted to put me where I wanted. So, Zach, super appreciate it, especially last show of the year. Thank you. We'll pull up the draft board now. If you aren't already, make sure you're logged in on YouTube if you're watching the show, because you can participate in the draft by getting into the chat on YouTube. So log into YouTube. The way it works is anybody participating in the chat can nominate a golfer, nominate whoever you want. The second time the person that is seconded, that means that's the pick. So as soon as a golfer is mentioned twice by the audience, that locks in the audience's pick. Audience, you are on the clock. So Davis Thompson counts as one of your nominations. If he's seconded, that will be your pick. We'll get more nominations. But with the first pick, audience, you're up now. You're on the clock. So let's get that pick in. While we wait, Spence, you really can't afford any golfer with the first pick. So I'll ask you while we wait, is there someone you would have targeted one overall if you were working with a full salary?
You know, I think you might be surprised, Joel, of what I'm able to accomplish with this amount of money. I'm playing around with it right now, and it looks like Davis Thompson is going to be the first pick from the audience. When I look at this board, and I'll segue this into my selection here, you get a board here to where, you know, I don't necessarily have a strong viewpoint one way or another on Oberg. It's going to be his first tournament since surgery. I do think from a betting perspective, more so than anything else, we kind of got a good outright board to consider because Oberg is being priced in this range right now where he's 10-1 and we really don't know where he's at. DFS is going to be a lot different here because it's going to come down to the ownership percentage. And I've seen one site that has him as high as 30. I don't think that's going to be correct. I've seen another site that has him as low as 13. So I think he probably lands somewhere in the middle there, which then all of a sudden starts pushing you down into where to consider from there. For me, if I'm looking for who I want to take with my first pick, and it's actually going to still be what my first pick is going to be, it's going to put me in a weird tight spot here. There are 2 players, and I'll just be very open about it because I'm not going to be able to draft both of them. I really like Ben Griffin and Brian Harman this week. Those were the 2 first outright bets that I placed. When you look for Harman, and there is this profile that comes into play. We have not seen him during the fall other than the President's Cup. He was the worst American, in my opinion, during the President's Cup. Didn't necessarily like him for that course. You get a really nice setup for him here if you're looking for that boom or bust upside that he presents. On the flip side of it with Ben Griffin, it's what I've talked about over and over again with Ben Griffin, to where you put him on these Bermuda courses, all of a sudden his upside ends up increasing. I know that there is this stigma around him that he doesn't win. I've been on the wrong end of the spectrum with that before, with him missing putts down the end. But, you take away what he did in round one and you kind of put what he did together last week over the final 3 rounds. I think Griffin is very close. So I'm going to take Ben Griffin here. It's very close between him and Harmon. It's going to put me into the spot where I'm going to now be fighting near the bottom here. But for me, it's Ben Griffin and Brian Harmon that are my 2 favorite players.
Well, things are certainly going to get interesting as this draft progresses. However, I like the first 2 picks. Davis Thompson's been playing great. Ben Griffin makes a lot of sense at Spencer's pick here at number 2. So 2 strong picks out of the gate. David, would love your take on both Davis Thompson and Ben Griffin. Then who are you taking with your first pick?
I mean, what an unbelievable situation that Spencer only has $46,000 of salary and still manages to steal my first pick in the first round with Ben Griffin. That's where I would have gone. Look, the guy's just banging form. He's playing great. He finished 8th here last year. He's a great profile for the golf course. Obviously, both of the courses, whether it's the Plantation or Seaside, they're both incredibly short. Much more of an emphasis on finding the fairway here, and then around the green play and putting as well. It doesn't look like there's going to be a weather edge this week, other than the fact that it's going to be quite windy and gusty the first 2 days. It's an exposed course. It is, of course, right on the ocean front as well. And given that puts even more of an emphasis for me on around the green game and putting, and both extreme strengths of Ben Griffin's game. So I think he's a steal at 9,300. And just incredibly surprised that we end up in this situation where Spencer's handicapped so significantly, but still manages to take a 9K golfer with his first selection and screw me out of the pick straight away. So very, very interested to see what Spence does for the rest of the draft here. Now, Joel's got back-to-back picks, so I am relatively certain that if I don't take Daniel Berger here, there's no way that he gets back to me. So I've got to take Daniel Berger. I think that he's fantastic value down in the sort of mid 7Ks, 7.5K. Look, Daniel Berger does need a big week this week. He's 127th on the FedEx Cup list. It's his first full season back after missing the entirety of 2023 with his injury. And we've actually seen the second half of this year, and particularly the last 3 months, he's really lifted his game, and particularly getting back into the swing of things with his putter, no pun intended, but his putter has really started to pick up really since July. Every sort of second tournament now, he's started gaining strokes on the green, whereas the first kind of 6 months a year, it was absolutely woeful. He's only played this golf tournament once because Daniel Berger, I mean, he's a former Ryder Cupper. He's played at elite level. He's had multiple top 10s in major championships. He generally hasn't had to play this tournament, but he is from the southeast of the States. And the one time he played it, it was actually his first season on the PGA Tour. He just graduated from the Web.com Tour at the time, Corn Ferry Tour, back in 2015. He played 3 tournaments. He'd missed 2 cuts. He came here and he finished 22nd straight away, gaining a ton of strokes on the green. So given that most of his woes have come with the putter as of late, he's played here once and putted brilliantly, and his driving accuracy obviously is a great asset here as well. I think he's a great steal at 7,500. I'm pretty sure that is going to be a steal as well from Joel, and very surprised that he's only 9% ownership.
Yeah, yes, you do know I love Daniel Berger, and he's definitely someone I was looking to take. And he's definitely someone I'm going to be heavily targeting again this week. I think the biggest factor from all the things you said are spot on, right? And I think you added this in at the end. The biggest factor is he's still sub 10% at 7,500. That's what doesn't make sense. I thought people would have come around. I would have anticipated him being closer to the high teens to still be under 10% ownership. I want to be on the side before that flips. And eventually it's going to be 20%. His price is going to go up. But right now, if you can still get this low ownership, we know the talent. This isn't a guy we're speculating will be good. This is a guy who has already been an elite golfer on tour who just got hurt. And now he's starting to show that again. To me, he's definitely one of the better plays, especially in these weaker fields. I got 2 here. Now, part of this is me being strategic with Spence, knowing he has to go value and trying to get some value early. But the other part of this is I think that the value plays are more scarce. And, if I end up falling or having to choose between 2 of the higher priced guys that I both like, I'm fine with that. but I want to make sure I lock in some of this value, especially now with Berger already off the board. So I'm going to start with Grayson Sigg. Grayson Sigg is my first pick. I know that sounds crazy, but he's been playing spectacular golf. If you just look at his finishes over the last few tournaments he's been in, he had 9th last week at the Bermuda, 23rd at the Shriners, 11th at the Black Desert. He missed a cut at the Sanderson, but even in a month earlier at the Procore, he was 4th. I mean, the results have been spectacular. He's doing it in all aspects of his game, right? He's gaining strokes off the tee, on approach. He's good around the green, which is really going to be a big factor here. To get a guy playing as well as Grayson Sigg is playing, and then the add in the fact that he's only 7,300 this week, it's a great value, great price, and I think he's enough upside to top 5, top 10 in the tournament, if not win the whole thing. I'm going to pair Sigg with Lucas Glover here. He's another guy. I just feel like they've underpriced this week. Lucas Glover at only 8,200. I thought he would have come in closer to the 9K range. Another guy who's been giving you some really good results. He hasn't missed a cut since August. He was 13th at the Pro Car, 3rd at the Sanderson, 3rd at the Black Desert, 24th at the World Tour Technology. He got 42nd in Bermuda, which wasn't the best, but hey, it's still 42nd. This is another guy who's really good around the green. He's been good on approach. He's going to need to find a putter. Glover is not the best putter, so we're going to have to write that shit. But if he makes some putts this week, I think we get another top 10 out of Glover as well. David, you're back up here with your second. Would love your take on Sigg and Glover, and then who you take with your second pick.
Yeah, look, I think they're both solid selections, especially based on where they are in the salary. Grayson Sigg at 7,300, just clearly quite a big misprice. He should have been high 7Ks given the form that he's coming in 3 consecutive finishes of 23rd or better. And prior to that, miscut, but he was the 4th the start prior as well. And arriving here at a tournament, he's finished 15th and 8th the last 2 years. So very, very clear misprice. As a result, his ownership's quite high, but you're going to have to obviously get different elsewhere, and doesn't mean that it's bad chalk. Like, the reason why he's chalky is just clearly because his salary is straight wrong. Lucas Glover, I'm a little bit less enthusiastic on, just because I am putting such an emphasis on around the green and putting. And if there's anything that Lucas Glover struggles with, we know it is the putter. In saying that, he's been so much better the last kind of 12 to 24 months, let's face it, with the putter. Since he's made that switch, he has started to gain on the greens, which is like unheard of. And his accuracy and his ability in terms of finding the fairways and on approach is a real asset there as well. So it does depend a little bit what happens with the flat stick with Lucas Glover. In saying that, I'm more confident with that now than if you'd asked me, say, the beginning of last year, how he was going to perform on the greens. So I'm going to go and have to adjust my lineup a little bit, because Ben Griffin was a really key piece of my puzzle coming forward. So I'm going to go and take a guy in the 7K range as well, who I just feel is getting a little bit lost at the moment. Again, he's 9% ownership, but a couple of starts ago, I mean, this guy had won 4 tournaments in his last 10 starts, 3 of those coming on the Corn Ferry Tour, burst onto the scene at the Black Desert Championship. We'll forgive him missing a cut in the Shriners when the weather was just dreadful, and he was obviously coming off this highly emotional victory, but Matt McCarty is potentially an elite talent who's just graduated, winning golf tournaments like there's nothing else, in a fairly weak field. He's priced 7K, he's only 9% ownership, and I actually think this is in some ways a better tournament for him than what we saw in Utah. I mean, we know that what he did in Utah was he just putted absolute lights out and sank everything from every which corner of every green he was on. But he's also a very accurate golfer, and he's not very long off the tee. Now, that's actually an asset, though, at this golf course. Like, you are putting more emphasis on finding fairways. Driving distance really isn't that much an advantage. And give me the guy who's won 4 of his last 11 starts at 9% ownership at 7,800 in this kind of field.
Boom. I like it. I love the McCarty pick. Betting on the upside, we've seen it already this year. Spence, would love to get your take on McCarty before you're up with your second pick.
Yeah, I think he's too cheap. When you look at what he has provided, so let's go back to the Sanderson Farms. He enters that tournament with a bunch of hype around him. He somewhat disappoints in a 63rd place finish. You go to the Black Desert, all of a sudden the price tag ends up decreasing. He wins the golf tournament. And then you put him at the Shriners, and all of a sudden he jumps into this $9,000 plus range. I ended up taking him that week, and he misses the cut. now all of a sudden, I think we've had too much of an overcorrection with the price tag down into this $7,800 range that he's at currently. I agree with David. There are still some unknowns, at least according to my model, about him. But from a pure upside perspective, it's about as good as you're going to get down in that range. So I think McCarty makes a lot of sense. And just for your pick, Joel, before I make my selection of Daniel Berger, that was a route that, or I guess that's David's pick, that I was really trying to find a way. How can I get Daniel Berger? I guess, Joel, I always assume you're taking Daniel Berger at the end of the day. But there are some golfers in this $7,000 section that I think are playable. I'm probably going to go for the most popular one right now and continue to figure out how I want to build this moving forward. So I'm going to take Jacob Bridgman. I think that this is a very similar thing from what we're seeing with Grayson Sigg, where there's a lot of popularity around him, but there's also this too cheap of price tag narrative that's coming into play. And if you're looking for any reason not to play Bridgman, I'm going to throw out the one reason that at least I noticed in my model to give the opposite end of the answer. So there's about a 6.2% impact in my sheet when looking at strokes gained off the tee for cut makers versus those who win. So to simplify that answer, the better you are off the tee, the more likely you are to make the cut. Now, all of a sudden, when you're trying to win the tournament, it becomes less impactful off the tee. Bridgman is not good in my model off the tee. So I think this is a little bit more boom or bust for what a price tag and the ownership is actually playing into the mix here. But this kind of reminds me a little bit of the Eric Cole situation last year, where every single go around, he's just too cheap on the board. And I'm going to continue to believe my model that is equating him to be a top 10 golfer in this field. So I will take Jacob Bridgman. And I do think that there's real upside to be had with him, even if the floor is probably a little bit lower than I would feel comfortable for the ownership percentage that we do have.
Bridgman, lock it in. Audience, great job starting to get your nominations in. You have 2 here, so make sure you get plenty of nominations and doubles so we can lock in both your picks. While we wait on the audience, Dave, we would love to get your take on Spencer's pick, Jacob Bridgman.
Yeah, look, I think that he's an interesting name. Look, he's coming in great form, 29th, 14th, 12th in his last 3 starts. Played it once, he finished 54th back in 2023. But when you look a little bit deeper into that, he was actually really, really good across 3 rounds. And he had 1 round of 73. Like, you just can't shoot a 73 at the RSM Classic and be competitive. So he finished 54th kind of off the back of that. But other than that, he shot a 69 and a pair of 67s on his other 3 rounds. So promising. And obviously, he's picked up a lot this year compared to how he was playing back in 2023, when essentially, I mean, at that stage, he was still a Corn Ferry Tour player, right? So he hadn't even graduated across the PGA. So, yeah, I think he's definitely a viable option. Again, you're just going to have to find ways to get different. Spence is naturally going to be different because he's leaving 4K on the table. So that doesn't really matter at this point in terms of ownership for him.
Exactly. Hit the nail on the head on that one. Audience, great job getting your picks in. It looks like it's Seamus. We might have some controversy here. Seamus Power is locked in. Zach says the other pick is Highsmith. David, I think you said Cole.
I put in Cole. I saw Cole's name twice, but I think it is Highsmith. I think you are correct.
Highsmith it is. All right, we got it corrected. No worries. Highsmith locked in. I'll be honest, a lot of steals happening here. Both of those guys were guys I was looking to target with my next pick. Audience off to a great start. Spence, we'd love to get your take on the audience's turn here between Power and Highsmith, or either or both on your radar.
I'm indifferent on Highsmith. Like, from a statistical perspective, he's outside of the top 70 in my model. From a safety answer, he pops inside the top 20. I think that's one of the reasons why we see this ownership percentage moving upwards. For me, if I'm directly comparing, and I will take the name that I'm going to take next if it's the same price tag as Highsmith, I'm going to take Andrew Putnam. Like, that's, to me, if I'm going to be over 7% ownership, I'd rather go down the Putnam route. I thought at the Bermuda, with that miscut that he ended up putting together, I was hoping this ownership percentage might even be lower. I really liked what I've seen in my model from him recently, of how he continues to ascend up my sheet in a lot of these either similar or decently good spots for him to find upside. We've obviously seen back-to-back top 27 finishes before that miscut. But one of the things that I like the most inside of my sheet is when I ran this from just recent strokes gained, didn't weigh it towards the course, he's inside of the top 25 for me. David alluded to this. I talked about it a little bit too. There's going to always be wind at this venue. He's inside of the top 15 for me in strokes gained in the wind. And then if we want to find people that can make putts, which is a very big portion of my model this week, he's 12th in my model when looking at strokes gained putting on similar green complexes. So, for as much money as I'm going to be leaving on the table here, if I look at the start that I've put together of Bridgman, Griffin, and Putnam, there's a very similar concept of all these golfers that you can see. And I think when you get an event like this where putting ends up being such a make or break for the actual upside, I'm not saying you need to leave $4,000 on the table or whatever this ends up becoming, but I do think you can be a little bit more aggressive in these spots. And it's one of the reasons why I even wanted to even just have this experiment, because this is not one of those tournaments with Scotty Scheffler or Xander Schauffele. There's a lot more that goes into this event. And, it's still not going to be easy to round this out. I don't want to make that answer seem like that's going to be the case. But I do really like Putnam for the price tag there.
So is Putnam your pick here?
Yes.
All right. Andrew Putnam locked in. Tell me, Spence, is Andrew Putnam, because I feel like you've taken him a few times, is Andrew Putnam one of your guys?
I feel like it might be more of, David, you can correct me. I feel like it might be more of your guy than my guy. I am kind of fringe on when I take him, but the thing is with Putnam, and there's a couple players like it, when they pop in my model, they really tend to pop. And when they don't pop in my model, they go in the opposite direction. And my model's been pretty accurate in the situations where it's decided to back him in the past. So when he ends up becoming a top 25 player for me, I think there's real legitimacy to that return of what I saw there. And just from like a safety perspective and nothing else, like I really like this pick, even if we are looking at 9% ownership, because I still think that if you backtrack this to a week ago and you don't put that missed cut into play, he's probably like in that Grayson Sig territory of 15, 16%. So I'll take the discount of whatever that is that we're getting right now.
All right. Well, then, David, was that a steal?
No, not a direct scale, but Andrew Putnam is definitely more of one of my guys than Paul Barjon is one of my guys. So that's a shout out to last week's episode and the fact that Spence is probably going to have to take Paul Barjon tonight. So long live the French. Shout out to Casey and Assassin and Joan and Albert Zach, all the regulars in the chat. Thanks for jumping in again. It's great to see everybody here. Bart as well. Mark, lots of new names in the chat too, which is great to see. I do. Andrew Putnam definitely is one of my guys, and the reason why is that he has to make his hay at golf courses like this. He can putt well, he can chip well, he can find fairways, but he can't hit it long, And so that you're not going to see him compete at a course like Torrey Pines all that often, because he just has to. His path to victory is so much narrower than what others who have driving distance in their arsenal can actually achieve. So this is kind of the tournament where he has to compete. Like it really is. And anytime I like Andrew Putnam, I usually end up liking Brendan Todd as well. Like those two just seem to go hand in hand in terms of very similar golfer profiles. So be interested to see if Spence goes that route eventually down the track as well. If you're not giving away one of Spence's later picks. I think I've kind of worked out where I want to go with the rest of these plays here. And looking at Joel here, Joel's got 8,600. So I'm going to go and I'm going to take, I think Joel's probably going to go like maybe another one of those 9K guys and then drop down and get one of those 7K guys. So I'll take Brian Harman here at 9,800. Accurate driver, good putter, obviously. I think Brian Harman's had a much better year than a lot of people suspect. He's obviously a high-end talent, and I feel that he's a bit of a steal actually at 9,800. And the other appeal for me with Brian Harman is again, I'm getting him at 16% ownership. I think that's because a lot of people going up to Ludwig at the top. I'm quite happy to take Ludwig on here as his first start since surgery and returning from the injury. There has to be some rust. Of course, he did like romp to victory last year and like easily won this tournament, so he does have that going for him. But at 30% ownership versus someone like Harman at 16% and saving salary, I'd much rather go this route and try and stack the team with some higher end players. Like I do want to avoid going too much into the 6K too often, which Spence is obviously going to have to do.
I like the Brian Harrigan for all the reasons that you mentioned. He's a better talent than he gets credit for. You get a bunch of savings by taking him where you took him there. Certainly has the upside to win the tournament. So I certainly like what you did there. I got to make a decision here of how I'm going to strategically make my next two picks to make sure I can maximize my draft as best as that I can. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take first a guy. I'm paying a little defense against you here, David. This might be a steal. I know he's a guy that you typically like. I'm not sure if you're on him this week, but I'm going to take JJ Spawn first. Again, JJ Spawn's playing really good golf. Some of the best golf that we've seen out of him in a watered down spot. They've brought his price tag down to a place where it's pretty reasonable. I thought they could have even priced him up higher. We've seen him in the 9K range in some of these watered down tournaments. But if you dig a deeper dive into the metrics, even dating back to July this summer, he's been on an absolute tear. I mean, he's gaining strokes everywhere, around the green, on approach, off the tee. I mean, the only thing that hasn't been perfect has been his putter, and he's typically a pretty good putter. So I think he's going to be able to make some putts. I just really like where his game's at. I thought he should have been priced a little bit higher. I think he's in a really good spot this week. And for my second pick, I'm going to take Wesley Bryan, and who's just been playing really well. He was drafted last week on the show. Wesley Bryan, Achilles' heel has been his driver. He's really struggled with his driver for years. More recently, it looks like he's figured that out a bit, right? It hasn't been killing him. And if he has a way of straightening out that driver to be a tool for him and find some fairways, the rest of his game has been really good, right? It's been that driver that's been holding him back. I think he's found something there with the driver, and we've seen it in the results. I mean, his more recent results have been spectacular. At 7,200, I don't see why that would change. If you look back to dating back to September, at the Procore, he was 13th. He was 37th at Sanderson Farms, 21st at the Black Desert, 6th at the Worldwide Technology, and 17th in Bermuda. So he's playing really well. He's another guy that, is pretty solid in every area right now, especially hitting it well off the tee. So at 7,200, it feels like Wesley Bryan is underpriced. David, would love to get your take on Spawn and Bryan, and then you're up with your fourth.
Yeah, I really like the Spawn pick. I think that he's interesting leverage within that range, just because, like, for me, he's the third lowest owned actually within the 8K salary range, and can't really see why. Like as you said, he's been playing great. I mean, since June, he hasn't missed a cut other than he had a random WD at the Sanderson Farms. Like, other than that, he hasn't missed a single cut. And like, his worst finish has been 45th. He's had a number of top 25 since then. So he's been playing great. He also arrived at a golf course where he's finished second before. He has another 3 top 16s or better in addition to that at this tournament. So he's playing great golf, probably the best golf of his career, actually. At a golf course, he's got 4 top 16s, and I can't really see why the ownership's faded on him here. So I think he's a pretty savvy pick. Wesley Bryan, I'm probably more of a fade myself. The reason being is just his ownership has just gone to like an insane level. Again, it's kind of similar to the previous answer. It's because he's mispriced, and that's pretty clear. But he's played here 3 times. He missed the cut, he WD'd, and he had 44th. And, if I'm going to take on some ownership, that's kind of a situation where, if I'm taking on like a very chalky Wesley Bryan, I've got less concern about that than taking on like a chalky kind of stud, if that makes sense. So I think the JJ Spawn is really, really sharp. I was on Wesley Bryan last week when he was chalky, and he paid off well for me. So he may do similar. And let's face it, pretty breezy in Bermuda last week as well. There's some wind forecast too. So he's got a good track record on these tropical or coastal golf courses and playing well in the wind too. So I am going to go, what's Spence? So I've adjusted, the reason why the draft board glitched out for a second previously is because I adjusted Spence's remaining salary to be 46,000 so that we all knew kind of who he's got in his frame of mind with his average salary remaining. So I'm going to go and take Denny McCarthy. I'm going to take Denny McCarthy. I think that the guy I'm taking further down the board, I don't think he's going to go. Look, I mean, Denny McCarthy, we haven't seen him since the playoffs. So there's obviously that question, but then also there's the other element of like out of sight, out of mind, right? And as a result of that, I think that we're getting a reasonable ownership on him at 70%, lowest of the guys in the 10K. Obviously, he's one of the best putters on planet Earth, let alone on the PGA Tour, let alone in this tournament. Had a good run in the playoffs, finished 9th at the FedEx St. Jude. I think TPC Southwind's a reasonable course to look as a comp to what the RSM Classic demands. And in 5 of his last tournaments here, 3 of those times he's finished 10th, 8th, and 5th. So 3 top 10s in his last 5 starts at the RSM Classic. And he's coming off a really good year with a number of top 10s again as well. So I think he's a bit of a steal. And, look, we're just relying that he isn't too rusty coming into quite an extensive break. But I think as a result of that, you're getting some depressed ownership on someone who otherwise I think would be a lot higher owned.
Yeah, I think these are the spots. Similar to Brian Harman, even though Brian Harman will compete in some of the bigger tournaments as well. But Denny McCarthy tends to thrive in these watered-down tournaments where he's maybe talent-wise in the upper echelon, and that's where he shows up and gives you his best results. This looks like a spot where I would almost say he's a little overpriced, and it's a good thing because it might keep his ownership down, and he can certainly compete to go win the tournament at maybe not an over-owned player as he would have been if he was maybe in the 8K range. So I like that pick. I think it's a really sneaky pick, especially for GPPs. Spence, would love to get your take on the last few picks, and then you're up with your 4th.
If I had a full ability to draft at not 46,000, like I kind of alluded to this at the beginning to even backtrack further, I would have gone. I don't think it would have played out in this fashion, but like Ben Griffin, Brian Harman would have been my ideal start. A name I would have loved to have added to that is JJ Spawn. I think, Joel, you are 100% correct. It's a weird price tag that we continue to see him moving all around the board with here. I think of the players left also, if we move over into Denny McCarthy, there's a lot to like about McCarthy here. There's safety in the profile. There's a reasonable ownership percentage when you're comparing it to some of the other names. So, there's a couple different ways that I could try to go about this. I kind of talked about it. Daniel Berger would obviously have been a name that I would have loved to have found out a way to get him into this lineup. I am not having that ability now. I am going to leave myself in a little bit of a slippery position here and go about as far up the board as I probably can while still making this actually work. I will take Matt Kuchar at 7,600. There is a lot in Kuchar's profile. A lot of it's going to be with the putter that's going to look good, but inside of the top 10 of my model in recent strokes gained total, he's also inside of the top 20 for strokes gained total in the wind. And if you just want to look at the last 24 rounds with it not being weighted, he's inside of the top 15. So I think Kuchar's profile looks really nice. There's a lot of names that would have made sense to also include Berger being one of them, but not having that ability, I will take Matt Kuchar here.
Well, I will confirm a steal. He was definitely one of the guys looking to get with my last 2 picks. To your point, I think this is a course that lines up well for him. I like that it's a weaker field where I think it gives him some more upside. At 7,600, I think there's a lot to like this week about Matt Kuchar. He would definitely be in my player pool. Audience, you are on the clock, so we need 2. It looks like some nominations are getting in, but don't forget you have 2 picks here, so get plenty of nominations in, and we'll start doubling them while we wait. David, would love to get your take this week on Matt Kuchar.
Well, if it's any modicum of solace there, Joel, you wouldn't have got Matt Kuchar coming back to you because he would have been my next selection as he came round. I think the other thing to mention, I agree with all the points, obviously, excellent short game, extra putter, great on approach. Wily veteran who's got the skills to kind of keep himself in contention and show up at these spots. But he's also a former resident of St. Simon's Island. This used to be his home golf course before he moved down to Jupiter, Florida. So he's got extensive experience on both of these golf courses. It's basically a home game for him as well. So he has got that advantage as well coming in. And as Spence said, he's got great profile on the wind. He's competed at places like Texas, which is almost always windy. So yeah, look, I really do like Matt Kuchar this week. It was certainly a route that I was going to go if I didn't get Daniel Berger, probably would have gone Matt Kuchar instead. Was still kind of hoping to fit him in as I came on the background here.
All right. I love it. Audience, great job with Carson Young locked in. Looks like we still need one more. Oh, Clanton. Clanton's locked in as the second pick. Carson Young, we talk about a lot on this show. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't on Young this week, but I can certainly see the upside. Spence, I would love to hear your take. Are you on Young or Clanton this week?
I like Carson Young. Luke Clanton, my biggest concern about him, and maybe this is getting too technical here, but my model is indifferent to the price tag. The thing that I hate the most is if you do look into the market, he is moving in the wrong direction against every single opponent. And a lot of times when you get this super chalky option in the $8,000 range where there's limited data and the numbers are pushing you in one direction, but the bets are coming in the other way, that's always at least something that worries me. Like, I would rather play JJ Spawn if directly comparing. I would probably rather play even Andrew Novak or Doug Gim. I don't have a massive take. This might be one of those situations for me, if I'm being honest, where it's like the Justin Lauer thing of last week where I hated the ownership and I ended up being wrong with the Lauer call. And maybe that's what ends up coming to fruition once again. But there are just so many unknowns with him. And you're definitely not getting a rebate of any kind when it comes to not even really price tag, but definitely not on ownership.
Boom. There you have it. All right. Spence, you're up now with your fifth pick. You got Kuchar. He's got $7K per pick to go. I think you've done a really good job managing this salary. We'd like to see how you're rounding out the squad from here.
So I'm going to, for the most part, I mean, we'll see what the final pick ends up going. If I end up dropping into the 6,000s, don't want to necessarily give what the pick's going to be away yet. But I'm going to take another $7,000 golfer and kind of try to avoid that range as much as possible. And I think this is a high upside, lower floor sort of a pick here. If you do look at what this golfer's done in his last three, you have 3 top 50 finishes in a row. You also have a profile here to where the putter tends to worry me at times. He's outside of the top 50 in my model. If you look specifically on Bermuda, though, he jumps into the top 30. Now, Joel, I don't know if you were going to go down this route, but I'm going to take Ryo Satsune here at $7,000 and bet on a little bit of that upside, because even if we look at whether it's Bermuda inside the top 15, short courses inside the top 15, weighted strokes gain total specifically for Sea Island inside the top 20. So, I think that some of these results that we've gotten from him might even be better at a course like this. So at 3.5% ownership, what I'm seeing right now, I like the ceiling that Rio ends up presenting here.
Well, I'm never going to complain about a Rio pick. There's always the upside, a sneaky play I'm always getting behind. At 7K in the situation you're in, I love that you went in that direction. David, would love your take on Rio, and then you're up with your fifth.
Yeah, I mean, look, you guys know sucker for a DP World Tour player who's come across, and especially one who's found success. And look, this is the kind of test that I've always wanted to take a player like Ryo Satsune at. He tends to do better on these like narrower, tighter golf courses. He won on the DP World Tour at the Open de France on a golf course that heavily relies on driving accuracy. You need to make your putts there as well, obviously, and he's a very, very good putter as well. So, yeah, look, I think he's definitely an interesting name. And last week, 29th, not fantastic, not dreadful by any means either. So certainly enough to like there for me to have at least a little bit of interest. I just want to go on the record as well and say that I'm a fade on Luke Clanton. If you're getting an amateur priced at 8,600 who is massively owned, and for me, I think prefers those longer driving distance courses than something that's generally a bit of a narrow test. Like, he can't use one of his biggest assets here, which is his kind of prolific length off the tee. I'd much rather go and take someone like Austin Eckroat. Like, Austin Eckroat's a proven entity, 2-time winner now on the PGA Tour. You're getting him at less ownership, and for me, a whole bunch more reliability. He's also better on approach. He's also better at driving accuracy. So that would be kind of the route that I'll go, and thank you, audience, for leaving him here for me on my fifth pick.
All right. There you have it. David's pick is locked in. Spence, would love to get your take.
I'm sorry. Can you tell me what the pick was? I was trying to figure out how I wanted to round
Austin Eckroat.
I think Austin Eckroat's one of those names that I was talking about in that $8,000 range where they're all pivots to me from what we're looking at with Luke Clanton. Like, if you look at Eckroat specifically here, I don't know if David gave a percentage that he saw. Like, I see sub 15% right now. You have the 8th place from last season. Plus, you have a golfer that is coming off of a victory that has been trending with form for the last little bit now. It just, to me, whether it's him, Novak, Gim, like any of those names kind of in that range spawn, it's kind of the route that I would also prefer going. But it doesn't mean that Clanton doesn't end up producing. It's just, at the end of the day, David's right. It is an amateur at a high ownership percentage.
All right. I love it. Now, I had a decision to make here. I was considering leaving a ton of money on the table and then taking 2 lower price picks versus taking Ludwig, who, is the low-hanging fruit that's still kind of available. And, it's how much risk do you want to stomach with an injury? You know what? Ooh, it's a tough I'll tell you what. David, I'll let you make the decision. Do you want me to take Ludwig or do you want me to go the other route?
I mean, I've very much got an invested interest in this because I've left myself with 6,400. So I guess if you go Ludwig, you could potentially end up down in the lowly 6Ks. But
I'll add, there's no player I'm going to take in this that you would be able to afford. So there's no way going effective.
Great. You're not going to be dumpster diving with me looking for bargains. I honestly, I would take Ludwig here, despite the high ownership. I mean, he's clearly the best player in the field, and it's kind of hard to believe he hasn't actually won since his victory here. It feels like he should have won and would have won at least one, maybe 2 more tournaments. And so he's clearly he's a top 5 golfer in the world if he's healthy. That's the question mark. As a result of that, I'm kind of happy to take on the 30% ownership. But I think given your position, I think take the chalk and find another way to get different further down the board.
All right. Well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Ludwig and I'm going to pair him with I had 2 guys that I was considering, but I'm going to lock in. I was considering Michael Kim, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go with Justin Lower, who is coming off a big 2 really good weeks, 2nd at the World of Technology, 5th at the Bermuda. Obviously, really good form right now. Rolling that form over to this week, I like. What I will say is I was also considering, with my next 2 picks, just taking Novak and Gim and just leaving a lot of money on the table, forgetting about Ludwig. I think both Gim and Novak have plenty of upside. I actually think that lineup is probably just as competitive as the one I ended up with. But I couldn't have afforded Novak or Gim with Ludwig, so I had to drop it a little bit to lower. Again, Ludwig obviously can go win the tournament. He's clearly the best golfer in the field. It's just a matter of how effective will the surgery he had a couple months ago, will that hold him back at all, restrict him? That is obviously to be determined. But in terms of talent, right, there's no question there. So that's a wrap for me, David. We already know how you feel about Ludwig, at least because you steered me in that direction. But we'd love to get your take on Lower, and then you're up with your last pick.
Yeah, look, I mean, when you compare those 2 options that you just spoke about, I mean, this is just a reminder in these type of fields, especially in the Fall Series, where the difference between someone who's 8K and the difference who's someone's like low 7K is really not that much, whereas you do get a huge disparity in those salary differences when you get into those higher end signature events, right? Like, you could go with Gim Novak here at the end, and I think it would be just as strong a team as if you'd gone Aberg and Lauer. Obviously, you're getting a ton of win equity with Aberg, and I appreciate that, but Gim and Novak's a great way to finish that lineup as well and leave some money on the table, get a bit different. And I mean, in Spence's case, why don't you leave 4,000 on the table? Like, you may as well, because it's a sort of tournament where those disparities between the different players just really isn't as significant as other tournaments. So the concern with me is with Lauers. He probably should have won the tournament last week. Like, I mean, we saw a 301 shot win. I mean, Rafael Campos, and I just wanted to shout out at this moment Steve Pillardi in our chat, because in Win Daily Discord, he actually gave out 3 selections of his Frisky Biscuit, and his insane brain play was Campos, who was like 1% ownership and no salary and went up and won the golf tournament. So that's the sort of value that you get over at Win Daily Sports. Again, we've got that 50% promo going at the moment if you use the promo code DeepDiveGolf, which is down in the description below. So it's a great time to sign up, and that's the kind of leverage and ownership that you're getting, not just from all the guys that you see on screen, but all the guys in the background who are running our models. And getting you just like some extreme leverage that would have won you so many tournaments had you had Campos and even just like 2 lineups, right? So like I think Lauer should have won that tournament. Really, he was the classier player, and he kind of arrives at a golf course where he's played it 4 times, he's missed the cut every time. He is in much better form, obviously, at the moment. And can he overcome that emotional hurdle where, you know, he kind of threw it away in the 4th round a little bit and probably should have been a bit more competitive, I would have said. Fortunately, I've only got 6,400 left, and I get to go and dumpster dive down the end of the 6K range. And I'm quite happy with the rest of the way that this lineup is shaped. And as a result of that, with the 6K golfer, like I'm looking for a cut maker with like maybe like the smidge of upside. The guy I'm going to take at the moment, according to DataGolf, is projected to be 0% ownership. 0%, which, you know, if you see him in the lineup, it probably means that I'm the one who's drafted him. And that's old dirt William McGirt, down at 6,300. McGirt has played this tournament 7 times. He has made the cut 6 times at this event, including an 8th place finish back in 2018. His recent finishes don't leave a lot to be desired. However, he did make the cut at the Butterfield Bermuda last week in windy conditions where he finished 37th. Obviously, he's 45 years old. I think that if he doesn't get his PGA Tour card now, he doesn't return. He goes and plays the PGA Tour Champions eventually once he's qualified for that. But he's 200th on the FedEx Cup ranking list. Rise of the golf course, he's made the cut 6 out of 7 times. Coming off a May cut last start after a pretty dreadful run of form. You know, maybe he can go out and like get something extreme in terms of his results. And he's finished 3rd here previously, by the way, as well. At RBC Heritage in 2017, which I think is a really good comp course for what you expect at the RSM Classic. RBC Heritage and RSM Classic just go hand in hand in terms of correlation. So happy to take a dart at 6,300 on old Dirt McGirt, and hopefully he gets made cut and the rest of the guys give me the win equity that I need. All
right, Dirt McGirt, lock it in. Spence, I'd love to hear from you. Was Dirt McGirt on your radar this week?
I actually think he's a good pick. So if I'm just looking at pure value of golfers that are inside the top 75 of my model, he would have been the 5th best value on the board compared to what his price tag is. And as David talked about, I have him at 0.17% owned. It's going to make him one of the better leverage options to also consider here. So I have absolutely no issues with that pick. It's one of those things where you're clearly hoping you make a cut. If he does, and he's done what he's done in the last 2 years of playing it, you just look from 2021 on, there's something there potentially. Can
I add one thing I forgot to say as well? The recipe at RSM Classic for me is driving accuracy and putting. In the last 12 months in this field, McGirt ranks 12th in the field for driving accuracy and 13th in this field for putting. So he sucks at everything else, but he can find fairways and he can putt the golf ball.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess for me with where I'm at right now with my build, there's a couple different ways that I can play it, and I'll walk everybody through my thought process here. So, you know, I want to leave more than $4,000. Like, I feel like 4,000 is the cop-out answer. So that takes away a lot of the guys at 7,100 that I probably would have considered. Like, Brendan Todd has playability here. He's been a golfer that has course success in the past. I think Alex Smalley, if you look, he's going to be popular at 7,100, but 5th place 2 years ago. The other option, if I want to leave $100 on the table, Chad Ramey. I took Chad Ramey last week. The form has been trending in a positive direction. That 29th place finish that he put together really should have even been better than that. He had a really sloppy triple bogey on Sunday that pushed him a little bit further down the board and outside of the top 20. But I don't think I'm going to go any of those routes. I'm going to take the boom or bust potential here. And when I ran my model, and it's something that I've talked about quite frequently on this show over this entire season, is one of the things I try to find is the better expected weighted form versus the recent form that we've gotten. So that's going to be golfers that fit this course better than what we've seen from a recent form standpoint. And, you know, I'm going to take Sam Ryder at 6,800. The course history has been absolutely horrific outside of his 13th place finish that he provided here last season. And maybe that comes down to his lack of off the tee performance. And I talked about it. Like, if you are sloppy off the tee, you have the potential to miss the cut. But a lot of the metrics from what I'm looking for outside of the off the tee performances are trending in the right direction. He's one of the only golfers for me that was sub 7,100 that actually landed inside of the top 65 for me for every single category that I ran. So I'm going to bet on the upside here on Sam Ryder. I actually bet him to win this tournament at 175 to 1 also. So it's very fitting to my card of the way that I've constructed it. And, you know, just if you remove his name for a second and just throw like the hypothetical Brendan Todd in there, that's going to have more name recognition. I think this lineup kind of shows that even by leaving $4,000 plus on the table, there is a lot of routes to go. And I think it's because of the mispricings that have kind of occurred here.
I agree, especially in a tournament like this. I think, especially, you're right. You proved a point that, like, you don't need to force spending all your salary. So I think one of my biggest pieces of advice is if you tend to be leaning towards some chalky plays and you like some of the chalk, that's okay. Leave a lot of money on the table. It's unlikely you'll have a duplicated lineup with a lot of money left on the table, even if you go with a lot of chalk. So there's different ways and strategies you can go about roster construction, especially in a week like this. Audience, you're on the clock with your last pick. So we'll need those nominations in. It look like there are a couple coming in. Thanks, Jack, Silent Assassin. We'll need some more nominations and finalize. You have $7,200 to spend while we wait. David, we'd love to hear from you. Were you have any interest in Sam Ryder this week?
I mean, classic overachiever Spence decides to leave 4,000 on the table, and then he gets to his last pick and he's like, oh, leaving 4,000 exactly on the table is the cop-out. I mean, you're already overachieving by leaving 4,000 salary on the table. And he's like, no, I must leave more. So massive shout out to Spence. Obviously very impressive. And if you manage to win this week, I think that you deserve all of the bragging rights that would come to you from now until the next tournament at the Century, where we do the Draftcast there. Look, I do think Sam Ryder's an interesting option, right? The big flaw in Sam Ryder's game is the putter. And you would think that given this golf course is heavily reliant on putting for your performance output, that would mean that he's excluded. However, he's played here 7 times, and 5 times he's a big gainer on the putting greens here. And the other 2, he was basically putting at field average for the tournament. So given that and the rest of his game tends to be pretty good, especially his accuracy looks to have shown a real big uptick as of late. 5th place last week, Bermuda in the wind, played here last year and finished 13th. I think that he's a potentially savvy player at 4% ownership is what I see him at the moment. So interesting route to go, and super excited to see how Spencer's team wraps up. Obviously, we'll post all the lineups on Twitter after this, and interested to see who wins at the end of the tournament.
I just want to add one thing before we move on the Sam Ryder discussion. So David is correct. He's outside of the top 75 of my model in strokes gained putting. The thing that made him pop in my sheet this week, 15th in strokes gained with Bermuda putting. He was 6th in strokes gained putting on soft to medium greens. He was 6th in putting in Bermuda from 10 to 15 feet. You throw all of that together for the weighted putting that I put together. He was one of the big climbers for me. So, you know, that's the boom or bust I'm talking about. You're going to need that performance to actually have him make the cut and reach his upside. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel here for him to be able to put that together. And fingers crossed that if what we've seen from him recently from a production standpoint and what we saw from him at this tournament last year can correlate into a result that works him back up the leaderboard again. All
right. Audience, you've dropped the ball. Not only are you nominating guys you can't afford, you haven't even gotten a pick. I'm pretty disappointed with how you've dropped the ball on your draft here. Silent Assassin has been acting as sitting captain for tonight's draft. Silent Assassin took Fisk. I think we got to lock in Fisk. He was the first nomination. Silent Assassin's the captain. Audience, poor job out of you guys. After what was a promising start, we hope to see you guys recover and regroup next year. Unless somebody comes in with another pick and nomination in the next 10 seconds, we're going to lock in Stephen Fisk as the final pick for the audience, thanks to Silent Assassin at the first nomination at 958. That is there is a controversial Higo who you can't afford. Wait, did Mark Green, did Mark actually, no, Mark made the first. No, he didn't. He didn't. It was a second.
They got it. They snuck it in just in time.
All
So
right.
they'll
Here
get Garrett.
it is. Garrett. Actually, I think Fisk might have been the better play. Probably should have stuck with Fisk. But now you're stuck with Garrett Higo with the final pick. Audience, way to come around and get the pick in. That's a wrap for the draft tonight. Don't forget to give us a follow and smash the like button. It goes a long way. If you're not already, sign up for Win Daily, right? Not only do you get our picks here in golf, you get Steven's ownership article before the tournament starts. You'll get our outright plays. You'll get in Discord. There will be weather updates as the week progresses. See what the ownership look like, what the weather looks like before tee off on Thursday. But there's other sports as well. Get access to football, basketball, college football, you name it. Sign up for Win Daily. It'll go a long way. But before we get you out of here tonight, we will have our first round leader plays as well. And David, we're going to start with you. Who are you targeting in the first round leader market?
Yeah, so look, interesting this week, right? Because you got two golf courses that are in play. Because of that, the majority of bookmakers are not going to offer a first round leader market. If they do, they're probably going to split it by course. If for some reason you find that your bookmaker is giving you access to the entire field without discounting for the fact that golfers are on different golf courses, you want to play the golfers in the first round who are playing on the plantation course. It tends to play about 1.5 strokes easier than Seaside. So if you do find yourself in that situation where you've got access to the entire field, all playing on the different courses, find guys who are playing on the plantation course. There's a definite edge there where you can take the bookmakers to the cleaners. So on the flip side, I'm going to give some first-round leaders in Australia, of all places, because there's Australian PGA Championship this week. And then I'm going to give some three balls and matchups for the RSM Classic. So we'll start over in Australia, where I've got three first-round leaders. The first is pretty damn obvious, is Cam Smith, who's playing in a commingled event between DP World Tour and PGA Australia. It's incredibly weak. He's finished first and third after the first round in his last two tournament starts, and you're getting him at 18-1 to be the first round leader when he's priced at like 8-1, 7-1 to win the actual tournament. Obviously, we know that he has the ability to go out and shoot an incredibly low round, especially in this quality field. Going to pair that with two covering bets. Daniel Hillier at 55-1. Extremely long driving Kiwi. He's found better form in the second half of this season. He's had some good success in first rounds as of late. Can go and make you some eagles, but he's finished 3rd, 12th, and 8th in the first round in his last three tournament starts. And then the last one in terms of the first round leader market over Australia is a golfer called Christopher Rayton. He's come up from the Challenge Tour, made his way onto the DP World Tour. He's finished 7th, 23rd, 8th, 3rd in his last four tournaments in the first round. And I think this is a golf course that's actually really going to suit him in terms of driving distance being a real asset. There's 3 par 5s to attack as well as 2 drivable par 4s. So having that longer driver is really going to be an asset for him. So you can get him at 90-1 in first round leader markets. I also like him as an outright for the tournament. You can get him at 110 or at 100-1 with 8 places. Then on the RSM Classic side, I've got 2 tournament matchups and 2 first-round 3 balls. So tournament matchups, I like Nav McNeely to win his match against Matt Wallace. Matt Wallace has just traveled over from Dubai. It's been a pretty grueling week for him. He was in contention there. It's a lot of travel to make us all his way over to Georgia. Obviously, he's looking to make sure that he gets his 125 in terms of finishing in the top 125 and make sure he gets all the access to the tournaments he needs. So if he does find himself like towards the top of that leaderboard, great for him. But I think that he's going to be like boom or bust as a result of that this week, because he does still retain his card regardless because of his win at the Corrales Punta Cana. And then I also like Brian Harman to win over JT Poston. You get him at $1.90 or -110 over BetMGM. That's showing as a positive EV value within my model at the moment. And then in first round, 3 balls, I've got Matt Kuchar to win his match against Aaron Baddeley and Kevin Streelman. Matt Kuchar is just clearly the better golfer of those 3, and you're getting even money plus 100 over at FanDuel for him to win that first round 3 ball against those 2. I like that number. And then finally, Matt McCarty to win his match against Luke Clanton, who I'm happy to take on in every market at the moment, and Ludwig Aberg, who's recovering from injury, getting plus 240 on Matt McCarty to beat those 2 players on a golf course that I think is really going to suit.
Boom. I love those plays. Spence, would love to hear from you. Do you have any first-round leader or matchup targets for this week?
I don't have anything currently. I think David very eloquently broke it down with a bunch of plays for people to consider out there. I will add anything over at Win Daily if I find matchups over the next 24 hours. But I mean, there's definitely a lot that for a tournament that doesn't have a bunch for us to talk about. David just listed 7 different plays to consider. So, I mean, there's a lot there to take in.
Oh, I love it. There you have it. I will say, if you look on DraftKings, you can get a first-round leader market, and it's only for the Seaside course. So you're not going to get the Plantation course. So there's not really a huge edge from that perspective. But if you want to play first-round leader market just on the Seaside course, because it's, not as many golfers, it's half the field, the odds aren't quite as big as you would originally think in a full field. But I think there's some interesting spots to target. So I have a few plays in the first-round leader market, starting with a name that we've mentioned a lot on this show, Matt Kuchar at 30-1. I like Lucas Glover, a guy I drafted at 30-1. Patton Kizzire, who was not mentioned on today's show, maybe don't have as much trust in him for all 4 rounds. But I think on 1 round flyer, I think he has a lot of upside. And the number here is 45-1. And lastly, another guy I drafted, Wesley Bryan at 45-1. Now, keep in mind that 45-1 number in this instance is a pretty big number because it's half the field. So I really like that 45 and something that those are 2 plays that I will be playing. So that is a wrap for us tonight. Again, last show of the year. I will miss you guys. It's going to be a few weeks before you see us again, but we will be back before the end of the year. Have some fun. Follow us on Twitter. Show us those green screens. Let us know how you do this week. Let us know what team you think is going to win. Of course, we'll be back next year doing it all over and crowning a champion. Good luck as always. And did I forget anything?
Well, it's the last draft of the year, so we've got to do it on 3, right? 3, 2, 1. Sports.